Right, so we've done our sterilisation and we're now ready to start our wash. We've got a choice here with the wash. We can either use 6 bags of granulated sugar, or if you're wanting to produce something of slightly better quality, you can use 7 bags of glucose powder. The reason there's a difference between the two is with the glucose, you've got roughly 10%, which is unfermentable. So that's why we have to increase the volume by the extra bag. The glucose powder will produce a cleaner, nicer tasting product, but obviously it is more expensive. We do not judge you on this. It's up to you. You try it, you see. We always recommend that you do both. Do a sugar one and do a glucose one and see what you think the difference is between the two. Most people will tend to use the glucose one for the spirits, whereas with liqueurs, where they're a little bit sweeter, the sugar and therefore the quality is not quite so important. So it's up to you, you make the decision. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 21 litres of water and we're going to put that into our bucket. Now that needs to be at 30 degrees C. So we're using a mixture of hot and cold water into our bucket, and 21 is the temperature that we're looking for. Sorry, 30 is the temperature we're looking for, the volume is 21. So in she goes. And hot water. Some people are always telling me, "Ooh, should we be using our hot water?" Yes, you can. We would say, as a general rule, that if you're using hot water and it's coming from a storage tank, there's a very good chance you're going to have some bugs in that, and that's not a good idea. So as long as you've got a combi boiler, or you're actually boiling it from a kettle, you're fine. And obviously water is the biggest ingredient that is going to go into our wash. I don't quite know why they call this the wash, but it's a name that's come over from New Zealand and it seems to have taken off here as well. So you've got a wash, which is a sugar water wash. Only got a little bit more to go now. So we're about 16 now. I'm just going to check the temperature. Yeah, I think we're meant to just reduce the cold just a little. We're up to 19 now, so we're almost there. We're nearly up at the 21. Now what I would recommend you do is, because you're probably not going to be quite as good as me, having done so many over the years, if you just put your thermometer in the liquid when you're about halfway through, and just have a look, see what your temperature is. You're looking for 30 C. 30 C, okay. So I'm just going to put that final bit in. We're now up to, we're just over 21, so I'll just take a bit out. And we're just going to check the temperature. God, I wish you could really have a real good close-up on that. You see how we're absolutely bang on 30? I know, I'm a genius, yeah. So we're up to 21 litres with 30 C, we're just perfect. Now if your temperature isn't quite right, the advantage is we haven't added any ingredients to the bucket. So if you need to raise your temperature, just take some out and put some more in which is a bit hotter. If you need to reduce your temperature, again, take some out and put some in that's a bit colder. Now you've got your temperature at 30, and you've got 21 litres of water, we're now going to add our brewing sugar to it. Obviously here I'm going to use brewing sugar because I'm looking for that better quality. So the brewing sugar we've got here, and we've got 7 bags which are going to go in. Now I'm not going to see you watch me put all, but they're just going to go in like so. Halfway through I'm going to give them a good stir, and I'll come back when I've added the rest. Okay, so we've now added the 7 bags of sugar. Just going to give it a final stir, just to make sure. You can see it's all gone a little bit cloudy, but that will actually go clear again. But I'm going to give it a good stir now, just to make sure all that sugar is nicely dissolved. Don't want any thick sugar down at the bottom of the bucket. So in she goes. As you can see as well, the volume has now gone from 21 to 25 litres. And that's obviously the volume of the sugar that's gone in, so that's increased it from the 21 we started with up to 25. Now, what I would like to do as well is just do a hydrometer reading. So the hydrometer is measuring the gravity. The more sugar that was in this liquid, the higher the reading is going to be. When I say higher, the more this is going to stick out of your bucket, out of the liquid in your bucket. If there's only a little bit of sugar, it's going to be here. The more sugar we put in, the further this goes in. So the hydrometer is measuring the gravity of the liquid. And she's going to go in there. We're looking for around 1.100, 1.090, in that sort of area. And yes, we've got just over 1.1 here. So we're good to go. Now, we've done the hydrometer reading, we've done a temperature reading. The final thing we've got to do now is add the yeast. And for this particular one, with the air still, we only want to use the pure yeast. Don't think about any other yeast on the market. The pure yeast is the only one to use for this particular machine and this particular wash. So we're going to cut that off, and I'll explain methanol and things like that to you later. So we're going to add the yeast, and in the packet of the yeast we also have nutrition in there. So the nutrition is going to feed the yeast and get that to help us with the fermentation. Now the other thing we have to add is this, which is the turbocarbon. Now the idea of the turbocarbon, you can see I'm just like manipulating it to get it to move around here. The idea of the turbocarbon is to make sure that the yeast doesn't give off too many off flavours. We're trying to reduce the amount of off flavour in this, and it's really actually quite difficult to find a yeast that will do that for us. So the addition of the carbon really helps. If we produce no flavours, when we come to actually do the distillation, we're going to end up with a product that tastes of nothing. And that's what we're wanting to do. We're wanting a vodka type without any taste to it at all. So hence the reason why this is going in. I should have said also, in the yeast, there are certain inhibitors in there as well, which help to make sure that the yeast doesn't give off flavours. Now, as you can probably see from here, I'm hoping you might get that, that really is very, very black. It's carbon, and in she goes. And I'm just going to make sure that we're not leaving any behind. So I'm just going to whip it down like so. And out she comes. And I can just feel we've got, that's lovely. And I'm just going to actually open this up, because I can just feel there's a lump in there. And I'm just going to put a little bit of water into the sachet, and again I'm just going to manipulate that slightly just to get all off the side, and in she goes. And again, that's that. So my hands are a little bit filthy, so I'm just going to run those under the tap, get rid of that carbon, get my spoon and just give it a nice little stir. You can see the yeast is sitting on the top. What I want to do is just make sure it's fully wetted, and it's actually be quite nice if I can just get it to go under the surface of the liquid as well. So in she goes, all nicely done, like so. I'm going to put the bucket lid, which has obviously all been sterilised, on. That's nice. And we've got our airlock, and I'm just going to put a little bit of water into that. As you can see, I've just half filled it with water across there. This is just ordinary tap water, and it's got a lid on the top just in case the fermentation gets a little bit excited. In she goes. Now it's quite amusing, isn't it, really, because on a lot of the other things that we're doing, the beers and the wines, we're actually saying that we want a liquid temperature for fermentation of between 20 and 25. Now you will have noted that I started this one at 30. When the sugar gets added, that actually drops the temperature to 25. Now this particular yeast that we're using in the pure loves to start at 25. So this is absolutely perfect for our fermentation, the temperature. And what we're now looking for is we're looking to put this bucket in a room temperature of between 20 and 25 to do the fermentation. And that's going to take approximately 7 days. Now we're going to be able to tell because when the fermentation is going, there'll be a few bubbles coming through this airlock. It'll be going plop, 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 plop. Now, if you don't get that after 24 hours, do not panic. You've done your hydrometer reading at the start before we added the yeast. You've made a note of that, and we're going to use that as our benchmark. So as long as this hydrometer is dropping into the liquid, even if there are no bubbles coming through the airlock, we know fermentation is taking place, because the only way it's going to drop is the yeast has to convert the sugar to alcohol, and that's why it's dropping, because alcohol is thinner than water. So as long as that's happening, don't panic. You might just need to put a bit of Vaseline around there or something just to improve the seal, or it could even be escaping from the sides. So again, use your hydrometer as the gauge. Now, as I said, we're going to leave this for 7 days. I'm going to come back and we're going to add some finings and we're going to degas it. So I'll see you a week today, all being well. Okay, so the fermentation we think is finished. We're just going to check that by dropping our hydrometer into the bucket. The hydrometer should give us a reading of between 990 and 980. And as you can imagine, we're obviously very close to the 980. Being the perfectionists we are. So when I'm saying that, I'm just going to rinse that off. We're looking on the hydrometer at being very much at the top end. There you can see 1.000. The lower it goes, i.e. the less it's going to stick out of the bucket, the more alcohol we will have present. The more alcohol, the more we're going to get out when we actually put it into our still. So that's the reason why we're looking for a really good fermentation. Now, if you're at all worried, please just leave it another day. Nothing is going to hurt for another day. Do the same reading, and if it's showing the same, you know fermentation is probably finished. If it changes, i.e. it drops a little bit further in, you know fermentation hasn't finished, and you need to leave it again for another period of time. Now this is honestly the really important thing. You've got to get your fermentation finished, because it will lead to other problems if you don't. Now remember, for a couple of days it's not going to hurt. So if in doubt at all, always leave it.